Hi, this is Julie, and while I've been on a break from the podcast, I've been diving into more live connection with members of the Mother's Quest community. I've started weekly intention-setting video check-ins. I'm almost done facilitating my first 4-month in-person Mother's Quest Circle experience, and the first virtual Mother's Quest Circle pilot begins this month. If you'd like to get connected, make sure to come over to the Mother's Quest Facebook group, where you'll find regular updates about all of these opportunities. www.mothersquest.com/community to join. Hope to see you there. Now onto this special Epic Guidepost episode of the podcast. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to 2 high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to this special solocast, a chance for me to reflect on the first full year of living what I call my epic life, the first year of the podcast, and what feels like the ending of a first chapter of this journey as I get ready to launch season 3. After a long winter break, one that my son Ryan especially encouraged me to take, I'm back, and I'm so honored and excited for what's to come. So if you've heard any of my previous solo casts, you know that these episodes are really hard for me. There's some extra resistance and a fighting of perfection that comes every time I bring an episode that is purely my voice and message to you. Thankfully, before recording today, I was interviewed on Sage Hobbs' podcast called Naked Conversations. She asked me right out of the gate what courage means to me. I encourage you to tune into that conversation when it comes out for the full story on my answer. But in essence, I said, courage to me is standing in my truth and power, even in the face of fear, for love. I love the quest I've been on. I love those of you who I've met along the journey. And I love this vision for Mother's Quest and all it stands for. So I'm bravely recording again with a commitment along the way to do my best to let go of perfection and share what feels true. I'm recording and bringing this episode to you in early March 2018 as seeds are sprouting and even some flowers have begun blooming, and there's this sense of spring coming in the air. And many of my coaching circles that I've been facilitating, we've been using the metaphor of planting seeds as we've all set intentions for what we want to create in our life this spring. And I decided that I wanted to carry this metaphor of seeds and growth forward to this episode. It seems fitting and full circle because the first episode I ever recorded, episode 00, which was also a solo cast, was called Planting Seeds for Mother's Quest. That episode captured all the moments, experiences, and wishes I had as I set forward to build this vision for Mother's Quest. Since then, there's been so much growth in myself, in my family, and in the Mother's Quest community. I want to use this episode that I'm calling Sprouting Seeds for Mother's Quest to reflect on what's already taken visible form from those intentions I set out over a year ago. Some of the gifts I've taken from the women who've come onto the podcast to share their stories and words of wisdom, and also to share what I'm on a quest for now, and therefore what you can expect in season 3. One thing that has grown is the number of like-minded mothers on a quest who've reached out to me to share about the impact of the podcast on them, who've asked to be connected to resources, who've joined the Mother's Quest Facebook group, show up for these weekly epic life intention check-ins I've started doing, and some who've signed up for the Mother's Quest circles that I'm piloting now. One such woman is Jody Smith, and I'm honored to share some words of reflection from her in this episode's dedication.
Hey, Julie. I want to start by saying thank you for everything you are doing with Mother's Quest. I am constantly amazed by the power of moms and their lifelong networks. As a relatively new listener, I had the pleasure of listening to back-to-back episodes for a few weeks to get caught up. And I will tell you that every single episode I listened to had an impact on me. Some of my personal favorites were Lindsay McCarthy and her Miracle Morning for Kids. I am a huge advocate of a morning routine. I find that I have been the happiest in my life when I have one, and why I hadn't thought to extend that to my children is beyond me, but she gave me some really good ideas. Nancy Netherland and her active gratituding is something that I will carry into my life with my children. And most importantly for me, the conversation with Nicole Lee, which is so important and needs to be had, and Nicole's openness, but honesty in the best way for us to approach these conversations about race and maintaining a growth mindset and teaching that to your children, I think was an absolute blessing to me. I would like to dedicate this episode of Mother's Quest to my own mother, Cindy Valley. My mom is a woman who grew her wings in her second act of life, and I am now having the most fun. Watch her come out of her shell, own her style, and just have the time of her life with my dad and them traveling. And it just makes me so excited about the next phase of my life, as opposed to fearing my children leaving the home and not having anything to do. That being said, my mom has encouraged me and supported me and really told me to find something I am passionate about that is outside of raising my children. Because when you are a creative spirit, it is very easy to get lost and to lose yourself for a while. And my mom just has that big creative spark, and she's so stylish and so spunky. And I think for a while she kind of lost that. And so she encourages me all the time to make sure that I don't lose sight of it and that I am being true to myself. And in turn, I make sure that my girls are being true to themselves as well. She taught me family is first, always. And that is definitely a value of ours. And she is the most generous person I've ever met, with her home, with her time, and her heart.
Thank you, Jody, for honoring your mom and sharing your reflections on episodes that have had an impact on you and your dedication. I decided I want to do the same by exploring the epic guideposts and some stories, lessons, and moments from the podcast that have helped me live a more full expression of my epic life. So I want to start with E, engaged mindfully with our children. There have been so many ways that I've been able to connect with my children, and really in enriched ways as a result of conversations on the podcast. One of the ways is really carving out special time with my kids, which came from a challenge that Dr. Elisa Song gave me, and also building in some Adventure Fridays with Jacob, which came from my conversation with Paula Mendoza. I've had lots of reflective conversation in the car with my children. Debbie Reber's conversation with me on the podcast, where she talked about surrendering with her child Asher, who's differently wired, really honoring him for where he is on his journey, definitely had an impact for me. And in recent months, we've had some challenges as we realized that Jake had some specific needs that needed to be addressed, and that his existing preschool environment was not the right place for him. So I was able to, I think, hold not a sense of judgment or wanting Jake to be different, but realizing that his environment needed to be different to support him. And we made a change that has really been working. With Ryan, I think related to hormones and adolescence, a period where he had seemed to be on pretty solid ground, has moved into some more challenging times as he's navigating more challenging social dynamics. And just trying to find his way as he's becoming, an adolescent. So I've been holding Debbie's vision about just really honoring our kids where they are as I've moved through both of those experiences. My interview with Karen Baker and her call to engage our children in service influenced me to bring Ryan and Jacob to a Martin Luther King Day of Service, to bringing Jacob with me to Canvas in November to help elect an amazing mother and woman of color to our school board, Jake on his scooter and me with all the materials. Both kids came out with me to the most recent Women's March. And also, specifically, we've been finding ways to connect Ryan to bring his experience of moving through challenges of being differently wired to working one-on-one with a younger child who he mentored before his bar mitzvah last spring, and to speaking to parents about his experience, which is something that he's going to do in somebody's home. He's being hosted there this weekend. And Ryan even has some dreams of doing a TED Talk at some point to share the lessons learned of his own personal journey. One of the things I've continued to appreciate the most are the ways in which my children have supported me when I mindfully engage with them by asking them for their perspective and when I share my challenges with them. A couple examples that stand out is when Jacob shared back this idea of focusing on our goodness when I was getting ready for the Women's March and the day that Trump was inaugurated. And that message of focusing on our goodness ended up becoming what I put on my sign that day. And later on, when I had the opportunity to do my first live interview at an event and I was feeling pretty nervous, Jake was able to give me his words of wisdom from having been in a talent show over the summer for how not to be so nervous. And finally, there's this moment that I share in the episode with Christina Kuzmic, where when I was feeling nervous about interviewing her, Ryan reflected back something about me that has really stayed with me many times when I've been ready to interview somebody who I really admire or I feel is doing amazing things in the world. And I want to share a clip of that conversation that Christina and I had together with that gift that Ryan gave me. I love that you talked about being vulnerable and honest with your kids as part of how you connect. I found that is so important. And I often ask my kids questions. I have a 4-year-old and an almost 13-year-old. So you and I have that in common about traveling two different worlds of parenting. But I've asked both my kids questions when I'm at a crossroads or feeling uncertain. And so in my intro episode, I talk about what Jake, my little guy, offered to me, which was just incredible. But last night I had an experience, and so you just reminded me of it, and I thought I would share with you. My older son was just getting ready to go to bed, and I still try to get in there before he does and say goodnight. And before he did, I said, Ryan, I'm interviewing, do you remember I showed you those videos? I'm interviewing Christina tomorrow, and I'm really excited, but I'm a little nervous. She knows Oprah, and she has 500,000 followers. And without skipping a beat, he said, Mom, is she more than you?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. That is so great.
He said, she may have more accomplishments than you, but she's not more than you. Just remember
that.
That.
I love your son.
Me too.
That is so brilliant.
Our kids have so much wisdom and have the power to reflect back and really mirror what we show them.
Yeah, so, and I love that you did that you went in, because I feel like sometimes as parents, we forget to listen. We teach our children, you need to listen to me, you need to listen to what I'm saying, listen to what I'm saying. And it's like that becomes a thing. It's like, you listen, I talk. I set the rules and you obey. And then something happens when we sit there and just listen to our children, and we can learn so much.
What do you think is one of the biggest things you've learned from them?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I learned different things from each one, Definitely. I mean, just again, not to keep repeating the same thing, but just the fact that we are so lovable and wonderful even when we're not at our best, and not just that I see that in my children, but that they can see that in me, that even on my worst day, they can see some greatness in me. It's like, well, wow, why can't I see that in me on my worst day?
The next guidepost, P, making a passionate and purposeful impact beyond my family. There has been so much that has developed there, specifically with Mother's Quest as this vehicle and way for me to live my impact. Since I launched the podcast, the Mother's Quest community has grown to almost 500 members. I've launched my first Mother's Quest circle, and I've also taken on a dream client in the organization Emerging Women to facilitate power circles for them. My podcast interview with Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin helped me develop more of what I call an activist muscle and led me to have an opportunity to interview her in person at her live event in the Bay Area, and now to be invited as a panelist for her upcoming Gaia Lead conference. The message from Elsie Escobar of She Podcasts, which I had been learning from her and then had a chance to go deep in a conversation with her on Mother's Quest about the transformational power of podcasting, definitely planted seeds for me to create an initiative last year called Women Podcasters in Solidarity, where I committed to recording episodes on the topic of anti-racism and police brutality. And I invited other women podcasters to commit to recording conversations themselves. I interviewed Mothers Against Police Brutality co-founder Sarah Marcuria and led a Giving Tuesday fundraising campaign to raise money for their groundbreaking work. But the greatest impact I think that I've had has been my willingness to share about my experience along the way, whether in posts in the Facebook group or through the podcast or in conversations one-on-one, bringing back reflections, challenges, and lessons learned with my family and community. This part of my conversation with Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin summarized well this unique aspect of the heroine's journey in which we are continually coming back to our community to share our lessons along the way. And this, I thought she just really beautifully communicated what I had been experiencing and what I'm committed to continuing to do going forward.
It's a little funny that you're talking about it because, the last 2 times that I've done major public speaking events, and I do a lot of public speaking, but ones where I was like in the room with 150 great women leaders, what I've talked about is the journey of the new heroine. So this is all very near and dear to my heart. And I have a number of friends who, have degrees from Naropa and the like, who have really studied mythology and who I've spoken to in depth about the process of the hero's journey and then how the heroine's journey kind of maps onto that. One of the things that I find really interesting about the idea of a heroine's journey is that in the traditional masculine model, the hero goes through a whole series of challenges and then he comes back to his community and offers a big boon to the community, which they can choose whether or not to accept. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that's sort of the end goal. I feel like the interesting thing about the feminine energy of the heroine, and there are plenty of new heroines, by the way, who we're seeing right now, like Sally Yates, Kamala Harris, right? Elizabeth Warren, that are out there just working so hard to save our democracy and to really take women's leadership in the political sphere to whole new levels. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about our journey, perhaps as women, that's different from the traditional hero's journey, is that I feel like with every step of what we learn along the way, we are bringing that back. My experience day to day, by the way, when I'm doing these broadcasts of Resistance Live, is that there are things that are triggered in my consciousness, whether it's about my daily experience, with my children, in my community, in my business, in my interactions with my clients, that gets me thinking about something that is reflected in the larger culture. And that usually forms the foundation of like the last 5 minutes of the broadcast, because I do my best to leave everyone with something that they can take home and really, ponder, consider, apply in their own lives, ideas of how to continue going. And I really do my best to keep pushing people forward, in part because I think the only way we fail is if we give up. And this is a time in history where if we give up, the consequences will be tragic. So my experience of that journey, so to speak, myself is that, ironically enough, the last 9 months for me, really since the election and a little bit before, have been very transformative in my personal life. My marriage came to an end. I moved out with my children. I'm now a single mother of 2 kids under the age of 5. And there are lots of lessons that have come along with that, while the intimate details of those are not necessarily important to the greater community that I serve, the experience of where I find myself in the day-to-day shares some commonality, and it definitely informs what I seek to bring back to my community through each challenge or phase of my journey that I pass. And so, it's really resonant with me, that idea. And I wouldn't say I'm on a heroine's journey that is any different than the journey that I've been on for my life, because I am one of those people who, since I was a young girl, really had the very strong intuition that I was here to make a massive difference on the planet. I didn't know how I was going to do that at every step of the way. So there is the journey and the trajectory of my life that has led me to where I am right now. And, but at the same time, the last 9 months in particular, just as for many of us, they feel like they've gone by incredibly fast and we've aged in dog years. They have certainly felt to me like a massive acceleration of purpose and mission.
Next guidepost, I invested in myself. There have been a lot of ways that I have been able to continue to delve into more self-care, self-reflection, my own growth and learning, and also the things that I really enjoy. One particular conversation that had a huge impact on me was my conversation with Lindsay McCarthy, the author of Miracle Morning for Parents and Families, and also the 10-day challenge that she so graciously led in the Mother's Quest Facebook group. I already had a morning practice, but this deep dive with Lindsay really helped strengthen and add components to what I do in the morning. And I have started sharing some of those elements with my children, but there's definitely room for growth there. But the tenets of the Miracle Morning have been just something I really value. And I so notice the difference when I do carve out the time to start my day with intention. Another similar exploration that also moved into a challenge in the Facebook group was with Edie Brotman on the practice of Musar, which is this Jewish practice for looking at different character traits and also making daily time to reflect and to practice. I loved my conversation with Danielle Dutton, who shined a light on the importance of meditation and also taking time for yourself, that sometimes you need to actually connect with just yourself and give yourself that quiet time and space. My conversation with Nicole Lee on how to hold a growth mindset for myself when it comes to courageous conversation completely shifted the way that I've been able to move into talking about race. And I don't think I could have continued to move through those episodes I recorded for the Women Podcasters in Solidarity initiative without that mindset gift from Nicole. And it was also something that I used to be able to have more conversations about race with my children. Finally, this reminder about self-care that came forward in my conversation with Women's March organizer Paula Mendoza about the importance of building moments for self-care into your daily life has stayed with me. And also about the radical nature of self-care, how it can sometimes seem like the last thing that we should be focusing on, but it really is if you are going to be living a life of impact, and particularly when you're dealing with showing up with your full presence during challenging times, how important self-care is. So here is this part of the conversation with Paula that really made a mark on me.
Self-care, Audre Lorde. Essentially, she said that self-care was an act of political warfare, in that when we take care of ourselves, we are allowing ourselves, we're saying that we are important enough to take care of ourselves, that our voices matter enough, our body matters enough, our ideas matter enough, that they need to be protected and they need to be ready for what is inevitably going to be a long, long road. We have seen and heard that quote so often, that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon.
Yeah.
And I've amended it to say, actually, it's a relay, because we cannot do this alone. And so My self-care is really my son, in the sense that when I come home and I play with my son, that is my joyous time. That is my time where it doesn't matter what Donald Trump has said that morning or that evening or what executive order has been signed, that the time that I have with my son when we're playing at home together is just for him and I. And so that's my daily self-care that I need to do for me, but I also need to do for him. And then my ritualistic self-care, my self-care larger than that, we did just go on a vacation, which was so needed. And I basically slept every night. I fell asleep at 8:30. And that was very much needed, but it was a hard thing to do, to get away, and unplugging was not possible. And I eat very well. So I'm a very healthy eater again. So I guess what I'm saying is that I try to incorporate my self-care into my daily acts of living, because I don't have time for massages. I don't have time to get a pedicure or a manicure. I don't have time to get a facial. I don't have time to go on retreats. And it's mainly that if I wanted to have time, I would make the time. But at this moment in time, I feel too guilty to be able to do that. I can't go and get a facial just for fun when my friends are being hurt. And so, and that's just my personal reality. And then I also have great friends that are also, most all of them are involved in this. So there's just great joy when we're together. I had some friends over last night on Friday, and we basically laughed for 3 hours. So those are my moments.
So powerful.
Yeah.
I looked up the quote that you were mentioning from Audre Lorde, and it's, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare."
Exactly.
Really powerful. The last guidepost, C, connected to a strong support network. My conversation with Nancy Netherland touched me in so many ways. It was one of the most profound conversations I had. And the way in which she brings gratitude into her relationships with her children, and also how in the midst of so many challenges, she has learned to rely on the support of moms who are going through similar experiences, continually inspires me and has really deepened my own gratitude practice in my life and with my children. My conversation with Samantha Edis helped me think about the importance of inviting people into my home and reaching out when I'm feeling the need for connection. As a result of her challenge, I hosted my first ever multicultural Break the Fast for Yom Kippur after years of feeling isolated and separated from my family during that holiday. It was really such a beautiful and fun event that I hosted in my home. And I also, as a result of that podcast conversation, hosted a tea with an interview of my friend Chelsea Bonini, who was running for city council at the time. Finally, I really appreciated this moment on the podcast with Nicole Lee, who I just mentioned, about building connections across differences and building authentic relationships that are not transactional. This part of the conversation has also really stayed with me.
Here's a part of the issue. A part of the issue is, and if you think about, I'm a 41-year-old African-American woman. My experiences with race and racism are deep and long for all kinds of reasons. And I think for most Black women of my age group, whether or not they talk about it, whether or not it's something, if you are their friend, but you are not a Black person, you may not be hearing about it. Runs really deep. And for most of us, it started from childhood, where we experienced everything from out and out racism to microaggressions that chipped away at us. And it's that trauma that often is the reason why some Black women will say, I'm actually not here to educate you. I'm not here to help you learn. It's almost like some of it's been there, done that. I can remember times in my 20s where I would have a really good friend I thought was a really good friend, and then some issue of race would come up and they would completely abandon me. And that's a part of my history, and that's a part of my experience. Now, for some people, that's kind of where their experiences begin and end. I have been privileged and blessed to do so much work around these issues that I've been able to heal from some of that. And so I can see ways to get into conversations that may not be innately comfortable for me. But for a lot of Black women, there is just a lot of work that they have already put out into the universe, if you will, around these issues. And it's hard, it's often when you talk to older people, they'll say, oh, we were trying to tell young people this or that for years and they didn't listen. And now you want to listen. There's also a little bit of that too. The realities that people are waking up to are things that Black folks have been living, for generation and generation and generation. And so there's that part of it. On the other side, though, what I am seeing, though, is one, genuine interest, right? So genuine interest from white folks to really learn about other people's experiences, maybe not the skills, not the language, right? Mm-hmm. To fully embrace and understand. And there needs to be spaces for that to happen. And sometimes the spaces aren't like the PTA barbecue, right? Sometimes that's not the space to walk up to the one Black friend you've had and say, hey, so I've been, reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' book and I want to talk to you. That may not be the space. That may not be the place, but really seeking out spaces, both for white women to talk with white women, because I think that's very important about white privilege and those issues, but then also really thinking about what do your genuine, authentic friendships with Black women look like? Like, what are they? So statistically, we know that most white people don't actually have that Black friend that everybody says they have. Not a real friend. They might have a Facebook friend. They might have a friend of a friend, but it's not someone who's coming over to your house and having dinner. That has a real impact on your ability to understand what's going on in the country right now. It also has a real impact on your children. And folks don't realize that. I meet so many people who tell me they want their children to have a multicultural, multiracial friend set. They want them to go to a multiracial, multicultural school because they believe that that will enrich their lives and that will make sure that their children end up in a place where they can be friends, quote unquote, with anyone and everyone. And yet what the research shows us is that by junior high, children's friend groups actually begin to just mirror the friend groups of their parents. So you can put your child in the most multicultural setting in the world, but if you don't have real authentic friendships with people of color, your children are actually just going to mirror your behavior. And there's all sorts of developmental reasons why they do that. And they do that in other ways as well. Even though it doesn't feel like they're listening in junior high, they're actually really listening and they're also really watching. And so, in thinking about that and thinking about how we get the information, we have to make sure when we're talking about issues of race and when we want to hear the experiences of others, that it's not transactional, right? That it can't be just that, oh, I need to understand this more, so I'm going to go, talk to my human encyclopedia of all things about race. Yeah. That doesn't work. Just like it wouldn't work with a transgender friend, just like it wouldn't work if you had a gay or lesbian friend and you wanted to understand that experience. It actually has to be a real friendship. So it can't just be talking about, what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. It also has to be talking about what you're making for dinner and what they're making for dinner and what's going on in their lives. And because we all, regardless of the identity burdens that we face, there's also some, real reality stuff that goes on in people's everyday lives that also has to be considered.
These are just some of the moments and lessons and challenges that have made a huge impact in my life. And the truth is, it's a work in progress. I take these challenges really seriously, and many of them I've completed, and others I haven't yet, or they've, moved forward, but they're not complete. And the truth is that all of these things are things I continue to circle back around and to deepen. And I commit to continuing to work on them. At the same time, there are some new topics that are emerging for me, things that I'm really on a quest for now. And so I want to share a little bit with you about what those are, some of the guests that I've identified to come onto the podcast, and just what to generally expect in this season 3. So first of all, I want to share that I'm committed to doing the podcast till we get to the next winter break. But I also am committed to doing it in a way that works for me. So I know that in August, when I'm getting ready for both of my children to have a pretty big milestone in their school career, one's going to kindergarten and the other to high school, I'm going to take some time off. but I'm going to bring to you either some previous episodes from the podcast or maybe some episodes where I've recorded on other people's podcasts to introduce you to some of those conversations. So I'm committing to going through to December, but I may do it in some different ways that will work for my life and what I need. I'm going to continue to bring you episodes every other week. There will be another round of the Women Podcasters in Solidarity initiative where I'll bring a particular focus to some conversations on the social justice issue. And there will continue to be ways to take some of the topics from the podcast and go deeper, whether through things I write, invitations for you to engage, or Facebook Live experiences inside the Mother's Quest Facebook group. These are some of the things that I'm on a quest for right now. To honor my children, I want to continue to engage mindfully with them and more deeply understand who they are and how I can support them to grow into the fullest expression of themselves. Already in the works is a conversation with Alethea Fitzpatrick, who has begun using Myers-Briggs not only in her own work, but in better understanding her children. I've been so curious about Myers-Briggs, but I've never really done that work. So I'm excited to share Alethea's story, but also really benefit from whatever challenge she brings to me and to us around Myers-Briggs. I have an episode coming with Lori Berkner, whose music my children and I have been rocking out to for a decade, who helps me think about how to use music and play as a way to more mindfully engage with my kids. For the Epic Guidepost P, there continues to be mindset work for me about how to get out of my own way as I step into more fully making an impact. I want to keep moving away from fear and resistance and to more ease and flow. And on the first episode of season 3, I have a conversation with Carly Nemo, who's a speaker and a podcaster who does these free flow conversations on her Carlosophy's podcast, which are in and of themselves an inspiration to me. I'm also continuing to pursue how to grow Mother's Quest as a venture, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk with Kimra Luna, who went from being on welfare to having tremendous success with her online venture, Freedom Hackers. She's also launching a new, more personal and deep dive blog called Sacred Mama, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all of these aspects of her journey and how she's connecting them. I'm continuing to grow my social justice lens and an activist muscle. I'm honored to bring a conversation with Gloria Pan, who's the Senior Campaign Director for Gun Safety for Moms Rising, to talk about how we can all move into more advocacy to support the young people who are leading the way after the Parkland shooting. I'm also excited to have Julie Lithcott-Hames on the podcast. She's a former Stanford dean and author of the book How to Raise an Adult. And I want to delve into her recent book called Real American, a Memoir, so that we can continue having courageous conversation about race. She explores the impact that growing up in a society where whiteness is pervasive had on her as a woman of color. In terms of I invested in myself, I feel like there is a lot of room for growth here. So many needs I have, so many things I'm on a quest for. One is to continue to grow my skills as being mindful and present and dealing with the competing demands and allure of screens, even in my own life. I'm excited to have on Michelle Gale, author of Mindful Parenting in a Messy World, and also to hear about the lessons she's learned being intimately connected with Wisdom 2.0, which is a conference in the Bay Area to help us find presence and purpose in the digital age. I'm on a quest to eat more healthy food for myself and my family, to learn how to use my Instapot. I have a request out to Michelle Tam of Nom Nom Paleo. I'm hoping she'll be willing to come on the podcast and talk about her journey to providing, which looks like the most amazing food, and how she engages her children in that process. Another area of growth for me is my time management and organizational skills. And I just heard today that Jo Webby, who is a mom and entrepreneur who lives in Japan and has created something she calls the Kaizen method, she's going to come on, and Kaizen apparently means improvement in Japanese. And she's going to show us some of the small, easy ways she's learned to bring more organizational skills to busy moms' lives. For C, connected to a strong support network, one of the things I've noticed is that I'm desiring a deeper connection to my own ancestors and roots. And I'm bringing on the best friend of Genji Heiston, whose name is Nika Smith, and she's a genealogist. And I'm just excited about the opportunity to not only do that for myself, but to also, in the process, connect my children more to their ancestors and their roots. I'm honored also to bring on some of my closest friends to the podcast this season. Kristen Downs of The Notable Woman is somebody who I met in the online world, but who has now come into my real world. She's become a friend who I share daily Voxer messages with and have even had the chance to meet now in person. And I'm also bringing on my best friend, Rachel Winterer, my friend since I was 5 years old. Rachel produced the Dallas Buyers Club and is in the process of bringing many more movies to the screen. She's a powerful storyteller. She's going to come and talk about her epic life and also about the movie that she's been working on since 2004 called Crystal, which is finally making its way to the big screen this spring. Finally, I'm sharing a special conversation with Mary Huffman, a friend from UCLA's family camp, where my family and I go 1 week out of every summer. She recently learned she has a fast-moving form of ALS, and I reached out to her to see if I could record a conversation. She's beginning to have more difficulty speaking, and I wanted to help her share all of these lessons and intentions in her epic life. But I realized, of course, that there was just so many gifts that I was taking from that experience. And I decided, and she was really open and wanting to take that conversation that was originally meant to be a private one and actually share it on the podcast. One of the great gifts of her conversation, there are so many, but it's just the power of when you are moving through challenging times, reaching out to friends and family and what it's like to have that community around you. If these conversations sound compelling to you, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you go to mothersquest.com, you can find all the channels to do that. Join the email list there too, so that all of these episodes get delivered straight to your inbox. And I would love it if you would share with at least one friend who you think is on a quest of her own about this opportunity to be part of these conversations and the Mother's Quest community. Along with these intentions and directions for conversation and growth, I'm committed to two particular things as I move forward into this next chapter. The first is to remember that it's the journey and not the destination that it's really about. And the second is a commitment to live my version of an epic life, to continue digging more into what that really means for me. And I also want to support you in defining what that means for you. So, as all of my episodes end with a challenge, I want to offer this challenge to you. Find some time, maybe after listening to this episode, to grab your journal and a pen, or maybe to find a girlfriend and go for a walk. And think about what you might have defined as success or an epic life in the past. What might have been something you felt you should do. And instead, identify now what feels real for you as what really matters most. So answer these questions. What are you most on a quest for now? And what does your version of an epic life mean to you? I spent some time writing and reflecting on that myself and created a post on Medium that explored this that I want to share with you to close out this episode. It's called Why I No Longer Aspire to Be on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. Ever since I was a teenager, I've admired Oprah. I have clear memories of coming home from high school, getting comfortable on the couch, and tuning into her daily talk show. As an adult and a new mother, I watched her finale episode while nursing my son, And in 2016, it was her show on OWN, Super Soul Sunday, that planted seeds for me to live what I now call my epic life, and caused me to dream about, during the day and in my literal dreams, meeting Oprah and one day being a guest on her show. Over the last year, inspired by a conversation Elizabeth Gilbert had with Oprah, I've realized I'm on my own hero's journey, one in which I'm the author of my story, can be mindfully engaged in my children's lives, and pursue my dreams. For the first time, I'm an official business owner. In December, on my 45th birthday, I launched a podcast as a present to myself, and I've interviewed incredible mothers, from Women's March organizer Paula Mendoza to Daily Worth CEO Amanda Steinberg, doing important work in the world. I've welcomed in a community of like-minded women to my private group and recently opened the figurative doors to my coaching programs. There are other signs of change in my epic life. I attended my first march and town hall and have been exercising a new activist muscle. I'm literally using my voice on a podcast and on live streams and beginning to speak and write about issues I would have been too afraid to explore before for fear of saying the wrong thing or facing harsh judgment. And I've brought into clearer focus other desires, like the creation of a social venture fund to seed mothers' powerful ideas for community change, and the writing of a book. But among all these things, there's a mindset shift in the works that feels most powerful of all. It's a realization that I need to look internally for the validation I seek, a belief in myself and a knowing that I'm here to make an impact that is uniquely mine to make, without depending on others' endorsement of that impact to make it real. So as I write this, I reflect on the things that matter most, that I grow into the fullest expression of who I can be, that I live a life based on the things that matter most, so I can set a powerful example for my children to do the same, that I make a positive impact as a citizen, coach, and community builder, and that I courageously tell the truth of my journey to help light the way for others. I realize that although I would love to meet Oprah and sit under the oaks while discussing the powerful book I've yet to write, that's not really what I aspire to. What I aspire to is to live a life of meaning and impact, of daring and stretching, of reflection and clarity. One that would be worthy of an epic discussion on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. That's what really matters, and I'm on my way. Thank you for joining me and coming along. I look forward to hearing about all of your reflections about what really matters to you. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.